Hello and welcome to this episode of MindMeld, where we try and help you move up in life and not just on with it. My wonderful and amazing guest today is Bryant from Singapore. Andrew is a global expert on self-leadership and leading cultures. He is an Amazon best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and executive coach. Bryant has spoken for audiences as large as 12,000, facilitated breakthrough learning sessions for senior teams, and transformed leaders through one-to-one coaching. With his expertise on self-leadership and leading cultures, he has transformed individuals and teams to be more intentional, influential, and impactful. Through greater ownership, he empowers people to become more resilient and agile to face the complexities and uncertainties of our modern world. Andrew is the author of Self-Leadership, How to Become More Successful, Efficient, and Effective Leader from the Inside Out, and the best-selling Self-Leadership, 12 Powerful Mindsets and Methods to Win in Life and Business. That's a mouthful, but, awesome people deserve a long intro. Thank you, Andrew, for joining me on MindMeld.
It's absolutely my pleasure. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. So you're currently living in Singapore. So how's the lockdown life in Singapore?
Well, it's not called a lockdown in Singapore. It's called a circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker?
A circuit breaker, yes. It's just a nicer framing than lockdown. And it pretty much is a lockdown. Singapore had the gold standard. We put in some very good initiatives early, but unfortunately the infection rate has got out of control through the dormitories of the foreign workers, which is really unfortunate, and a little bit of a cultural indictment of the way we treat our foreign workers.
Ooh. Wow. It's a interesting time right now. I don't want to say a tough time because it means different things to different people, but it's an interesting thing right now, right around the world, with this pandemic that having struck in everybody in a lockdown situation or a circuit breaker situation or whatever it might be called. How do you deal with this as a self-leadership expert now? How do you find this situation? What do you do?
Well, I think I pre-frame that a little bit. So, you gave me a great introduction, and thank you very much for that. Here's the thing about being a writer on self-leadership is that, I think we teach best that which we find hardest to learn. I wrote 2 books on self-leadership because I think I needed some self-leadership in my life. I have the self-leadership strategies. And so if I'm going to have a pity party, I'm going to be able to get out of it faster. But it doesn't mean I don't have a pity party. And I think that's a very important thing to recognize in any human psychology is that it would be unhealthy not to notice the emotions. So as we've gone into the circuit breaker or the lockdown, and I've been basically constricted to my house for 4+ weeks now, and I'm separated from 2 of my children who are with a previous wife, so I don't get to see them. So there is an impact on me. There's an impact on my ability to travel, the impact on speeches that got canceled, and therefore on my income. And so my life has been disrupted the same as anybody else's, or not as bad as I mentioned to those, to the migrant workers, but my life has been disrupted. And so I have the same emotions that everybody has. You go through Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. You get angry, and you go into bargaining and frustration, and even moments of depression. I found that after watching 3 movies sequentially, that I hated myself because I hadn't been able to go to the gym and get the natural endorphins. So the first thing I would say is just because I write on self-leadership doesn't make me a guru of this. The great Zig Ziglar, the motivational speaker, said that motivation is like taking a shower. The effect is not permanent, right?
But so you still do it every day, right?
Yeah. Don't do it every day. And so how am I coping? I have been frustrated, and I felt like a caged animal, and I've been short periodically, and at the same time, with the self-leadership strategies, I've been able to reach acceptance earlier than a lot of people would have, because I know that, I have to accept this. It is what it is. And so once we can accept, we can adjust, and we can advance. And when we are disrupted like this, the thing that saves us is having some level of habit. is having some planning, right? So, I'm talking to you, I'm wearing a shirt, a jacket. You don't know whether I'm wearing pants or not, but I am. And I get up, I get up at the same time, I do some exercise, I get into the office, I do the work. So as much as possible, maintaining a productive routine and a sense of purpose. That's how I've been coping with it. And obviously coaching senior leaders around the world, helping them to maintain some level of structure and framework, because without that, they feel adrift.
Mm. And I think it's so important that you're saying that we shouldn't ignore the bad feelings, right? You're going to feel bad. Doesn't matter who you are, whether you're an expert in whatever, right? Human emotions are volatile. They are complex, and you shouldn't ignore them. If you're going to feel bad about something, okay, right? But I think what you said very important now is that through the methodologies of self-leadership and writing about it and experiencing this and teaching other people, you've been able to move past that uncertainty, that period of self-doubt, depression, of hating yourself even, and getting to a resolution where you're saying, okay, I've accepted now that this is the norm, this is the way things are. What can I do about it?
Sure. And getting into a level of locus of control. So one of the pieces of research that goes into self-leadership is this concept of locus of control. What can I control? And I don't know whether your readers or viewers have ever come across the book by Dr. Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a prisoner of war under the Nazis, and he was destined to death in a gas chamber. And he realized that the last of all human freedoms is the freedom to choose our own attitude. And so regardless, we do get choice over how we're going to face this. And I think it's very important that we get to that locus of control as quickly as possible, right? And I see, Dr. Martin Seligman talked about learned optimism and also learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is you make it personal, you make it about you make it pervasive, you make it about everything, and you make it permanent. It's never going to change. Now, one of the things about the current crisis is you can't exactly say, why me? Because you can't take it personally because it's happened to everybody. You can make it about everything and you can think it's never going to change. But it's not about everything. I'm actually eating healthier now than I was because my wife has taken over the household cooking. And typically we had delegated that to a helper. She's taken that over. So I'm eating tremendously well, very healthy. And, I'm in a safe environment. So it's not about everything. My travel is cut off. My ability to earn an income in certain areas is restricted, but it's not about everything. And it won't be forever. So I think it's very important that we get a level of what can we control.
That's nice. And I was the same way. When this virus struck and events were cancelled, and I had all these events lined up and even my own events, and I can't do anything now. And I was so, and I was angry, but I didn't know who to be angry at, right? How are you angry at a virus, right? It doesn't make any sense. So you're just angry and you internalize that anger and it's this storm inside of you that you just don't know what to do with. And then it comes out in unfortunate, unexpected ways. So I think it's important to deal with your feelings and voice it and be honest and open about what you're feeling.
Well, I mean, let me pick up on what you said. Firstly, you did the I can't do anything. And of course, that's pervasiveness. You are doing this video conference with me, right? So it's not that you can't do anything. So, we generalize so quickly, right? Then you said, I didn't know who to be angry at. Now, a lot of people have got angry at certain racial groups or political individuals. People have got angry. People have looked for a source of their anger. And it's not particularly healthy, right? The worst thing, as you see, is to, internalize that anger, right? Anger is the emotion that around boundaries, and it's the force for change. So we get angry when our personal boundaries are invaded, right? Somebody pushes into you in public transport, you push back because you want to maintain your personal space. We get angry when things impose upon our psychological space. And what COVID-19 has done is it's restricted our movement. So we're pushing against something. So that's the natural anger. When you recognize what is this anger about, and asking that self-coaching question, which is, what am I angry about? And then if you can identify and you say, well, how can I use that anger? Because anger is the fire for change. It's the creativity piece, right? And I'm often fond of arguing against people who say, follow your passion, right? Because it sounds very motivational, follow your passion. But the interesting thing in the world is a lot of creativity comes out of anger. Uber was not started by two people who are passionate about transportation. It was started by two guys who were pissed off they couldn't get a taxi. Right? And so I think if you're watching this and you're angry, and if you're still working with anger, how can I channel that anger? Because that's the real creative juice. When I remember taking a stand-up comedy class 15 years ago. And where does comedy come from? It's the things that irritate you, right? Write down all the things that annoy you, all right? And then you can turn them up into a stand-up comedy routine. It's a nice outlet for your anger, right?
That's so nice. That's brilliant. Yeah. And that's just cool, because that makes perfect sense, right? We don't, because we're passionate about something, right? And I know that find your passion is it's a catch-all term to be motivational, all kinds of things, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? And that's why so many motivational speakers just really annoy me when they say things or the starfish story, which I hate, right? I can't even, it makes a difference to this one. It's like, it's fine. It's a nice story, right? But I've heard it so many times now. It's just right now seems ridiculous. Or everybody quotes Obama or Oprah or these people. It's like, and I thought to myself, isn't there someone more local, more that can speak to me or the local people instead of these people?
I've often thought about doing a stand-up comedy routine about all the motivational cliches.
I'd watch it.
I think, I'm one of the sections in my 2012 book talks about realistic optimism, right? I think we have to be very realistic. Optimism is better than full-on pessimism, but if you're only optimistic, you make bad decisions. And there's a lot of research around this, is that if you're super happy, it's actually the wrong time to make a decision, right? So we need realistic optimism. We need to see, there's possibilities and solutions, but there's danger, right? And I think one of the things that people have forgotten, and I think that COVID-19 has reminded us, is the world is not a particularly safe place. Right? Things have changed in just the last 50, 60 years, where mortality has dropped and longevity has increased, and generally the number of wars and conflicts has reduced significantly. Healthcare and social care has gone up, and so we've got soft. We've got really, really soft. Banks get bailed out, businesses get bailed out. And so people are not really experiencing their full consequences of their decisions. And, so if we raise this current scenario to a philosophical one, and that's where my energy's been going, is philosophically, how is COVID-19 going to change us, if at all? There's lots of cliches on Facebook about, it's not about a return to normal, because normal was a disparity of wealth and it was unusual, and then we're going to return to a new normal, and we're going to be more, aligned and spiritual and aware, or we're going to actually devolve into petty nationalism and autocratic leadership, and the whole thing's going to go to hell. So I think it's a really good time to think about, is there going to be any real change in human consciousness? Because we got over the 1918 flu. We got through global financial crisis, and nothing particularly changed then, right? So I think it's a real opportunity for people to start thinking about what's really important. A couple of things that I think I'm really happy about is that there is an increased trust, despite years of governments and conspiracy theorists knocking science down. I'm really happy to see that science is back up there. That's what people, people who are making, rational scientific decisions opposed to, and I know I'm going to upset a few people, crazy faith-based decisions, because COVID-19 doesn't care what you believe.
That's the thing. It doesn't care. Yeah.
It doesn't care what you believe. So, the Pope is practicing social distancing, but some wacky religious leaders are not. Now, of course, if you believe in those wacky religious leaders, please switch off now, because you've been offended. All right. But here's the reality. What has emerged is that we do need to pay attention to science and to people who are doing thinking. Whereas up until recently, there's been this massive distrust of thinkers and science. And it's just nice to see that that's being validated. Hopefully that gives us a more sane approach as we move forwards.
I like because now the dark ages were basically a discrimination of any sort of scientific, logical or investigative principles. And it was a dark age. It's not because it was dark, right? But it was emotionally and intellectually dark, and the bad stuff sort of came through, and witch hunting and all kinds of stuff, right? Which is what happens when we don't think things critically. And I like what you said, that being extremely happy is a bad time to make decisions, because you're not thinking critically and you're not evaluating your options in a careful, considered manner, because you're sitting, you're cloud nine, nothing can happen, nothing is wrong. And you're absolutely 100% correct. We have gotten soft. And I like that, because it's so true. We do get bailed out. We always run back to the safest option, all kinds of things. And we're expecting the government to help us in all kinds of different situations. And it's just simply not realistic. And I was thinking the other day, are human beings still evolving, right? On a physical level now? Because we evolve due to external stimuli that forces us to adapt to the situation or the surroundings. But now human beings have adapted the surroundings to fit to us as we are. So there's no sort of stimulus that sort of pushes us to evolve. I'm not a evolutionary scientist. I don't know if we're still evolving or not, or whatever, right? Possibly, maybe something else. But if you are an evolutionary scientist, please leave me a comment, or send me an email and rant about it. That's fine. But it's so true. And right now, I don't know if things will change. But when you say that the last real freedom is our sense of choice.
Yeah, a choice of our own attitude.
Our own attitude. And I think that's what we can do right now, is we can choose. Maybe we can't change the world, but maybe we can change ourselves.
Yes, we can. The self-leadership, the simplest definition that I have a few definitions in my books, and if you Google self-leadership, you'll find me in my definitions. But it's the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. So as we deconstruct this is having an intention, having a why, having a purpose to influence your thinking and feeling. So we think and feel as a reactivity to what happens around us, but we also can change and moderate, reframe our thinking and our feeling if we're intentional towards an objective. So the important thing here is, in a situation like this, we can be reactive or proactive. Now, that was articulated by Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The gap between stimulus and response is proactivity. And I articulate that in self-leadership. It's intentionality. Simon Sinek says, begin with why. So it's a common theme that we can handle any what if we have a big enough why. And the evolution here is the evolution of thought. Why? What's really important to us? And what this pandemic has articulated is what's been really important around the world is stock prices, right? What's driven decisions is money. And then suddenly everything changes. Nobody gives a damn about, well, they give a bit of a damn, but they give a lot more damn about their health and survival. So it changes what's important. And so the intentionality changes. And the challenge we have is to maintain our individuality, because typically when there's a crisis like this, we hand over authority. And we're seeing this, certain countries are, exercising totalitarian legislation to allow them to exercise what they need to do to protect their populations. The problem is those things never can particularly roll back, right? I mean, I have an app on my phone in Singapore that lets the Singapore government know where I am because it'll alert me if I'm near a cluster. So that's useful. But but what else is it? What else is it gathering on me? I don't know. All right, so I'm going to want that off later, right? But the Americans after 9/11 instigated a whole bunch of laws to protect them against future terrorist attacks, which allowed them to invade a level of privacy of their population. None of those rules have been rolled back. So what we've got to be very careful here is, yes, we need to practice having our own thoughts, our own feelings and actions around, keeping our family safe, getting into routines, being productive. All that's important. But what we also need to go is that we should not abdicate our responsibility. We've elected people into governments around the world who have not found a way to protect us against a real threat. They've focused their money on building weapon systems because of the military-industrial complex, right? But they haven't necessarily built health systems that can help us, or social safety nets that need to help us, at the same time promoting creativity and productivity. So we really have not, as a global economy, worked out how to collaborate. And the worst thing about this is everybody retreats back into their little nationalism, when what we have sorely lost in this particular is a global response to the pandemic. We do not have a leader of the free world right now. We don't have a super functioning United Nations that takes control, right? So what we've done is that we've given up a lot of that human beings as a tribe for individual national benefits. And coming out of this, the countries are all going to be in competition with each other over resources instead of collaborating. And any anti-COVID vaccine should be produced at non-profit and delivered to everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Or you're going to be an evolutionary scientist and say only those that develop natural resistance are going to evolve to benefit. But what other benefit does that DNA have? Did the smart people get resistance, or did the stupid people get resistance?
I never thought of it like that. Yeah, because they tried this whole herd immunity thing, and then a lot of people died, and it's like, oh, maybe this is not the best choice to have. But yeah, there's no guarantee that people of reason, of intellect, of action, whatever you want to call it, will be the ones that come out on top, right? There's no guarantee of that it's going to be a better society for those that are immune.
You philosophically on incredibly dangerous ground. Who decides who gets the vaccine? Who decides? This is it's totalitarian in its viewpoint. If there, I'm tempted to say the nice thing about COVID-19, but that's just a horrible sentence, right? The reality of COVID-19 is that it's a great equalizer. It doesn't care about your race, religion, sex, ethnicity, even age, right? Yes, there are at-risk communities, but it has affected children, unfortunately, as well. So it's a great equalizer, and it says it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. You can catch this. And so it does challenge us individually to think about both who we are as human beings and how we fit into a human society. And there are some big questions that should be asked after this and during this, but unfortunately, I'm not sure they will be. And that will be a huge loss and disappointment, I think, for future generations. I think you and I might live through this, but the next generations will pay a price if we don't make some really important decisions about who we are in relationship to the planet on which we live.
That's true. And right now, I see the change happening. I'm not going to upset people now, the soy boy revolution, right? Where things are just there's the softness of men. You know, it's like there has to be, they have to have things in such a particular way, in such detail, that it's just, I don't even know how to explain it. It's, they can't take too much sun, too much dark. You know, they spend all their lives behind the computer. You know, it's this sort of way they expect the world to fit around them, basically. And the world is not designed to fit around individuals. The world is designed to test you. I think in one of the books it says that the world gives you the test before it gives you the what?
Yeah.
I can't remember now exactly.
Well, life is a test you didn't study for, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Life's a test. You know, and it doesn't give you the results until you've gone through the test. I think there's a, you know, with self-leadership, the absence of self-leadership is blaming and complaining, right? So I'm not sure I'm familiar with the phrase that you have, but you know, around these sort of fragile individuals that want, you know, if they don't get their soy latte,
yeah.
Absolutely correct. Look, I mean, obviously, you know, I'm of a generation that, you know, I started an apprenticeship in my father's hardware store at 10 years old. And so, you know, I learned the work ethic and working long hours and getting dirty. And so it's very easy to judge, but every generation since Socrates has complained about the generations after being soft.
That's true.
Soft.
That's exactly true. Yeah.
So I think, you know, my kids are resilient in a different way. But I think, you know, what we need to do, you know, what I do for organizations is I encourage them to create a culture that encourages self-leadership, which is taking ownership, taking responsibility. What can I do? Yeah, okay, this is a problem. What can I do to solve it? Not just waiting for instructions. So within organizations, you know, there's a productivity, a creativity, and an agility that comes out of having people on board that are prepared to take ownership and say, okay, you know, I'm not going to wait for instructions. You know, this is a problem. It needs solving. Let me get to work on that. And whether we're doing that in our own lives or we're doing that in our jobs, that will make us a valuable contributor. And I think, you know, forget long-term evolution. The evolution post this are the employees that are vital, are the ones that are able to add value, right?
Yes.
And what we're seeing is, you know, we pay football, you know, we pay footballers $1 million or £1 million a week. And what do we pay a national health care worker or a nurse, whatever country, and we pay them, you know, there needs to be a reevaluation about what's important. Suddenly we realize the people that stay behind the counter at the supermarket are actually vital employees. And what if we could give them a level of ownership and responsibility and equity in the organization? How would that change? So there's some really good things that we could talk about and really question right now. But if you are worried about your rice bowl, how you're going to feed yourself, how you're going to feed your kids, then that's all you end up focusing about. And then we go back to, you know, a previous way where people are, as Henry Thoreau said, living lives of quiet desperation.
I think it's difficult right now for a lot of families that don't have any system set up to deal with the lockdown or circuit breaker situation, that don't have a way of, they don't have the skill to deal with the situation, which is why I think coaches and trainers and all these people are such valuable people to have, because, but of course now, like I said, there are people who are just going to sit and watch cat videos on YouTube rather than apply themselves and, you know, actually learn something or take a course or something like that.
Yeah, look, I think I think that's going to be a great question. What did you do during the lockdown? What skills did what skills did you learn? Now, I think, you know, spend a period of time in grief and, you know, sure, catch up on a bunch of movies, catch up on some sleep, eat too much, drink too much for a period of time. But as I said, pity parties have to have a limit. Because here's a question I asked myself a couple of days ago. What if this doesn't change? Yeah. What if this is the rest of my life? I don't get to leave my house. Well, fortunately, we have the internet, and I can influence globally from my home office. And I've been using that opportunity to do that. I've given you the time right now, possibly to stimulate some thought for your listeners, right? So I've added some value. Just before this call, I was coaching somebody to help him, in a work situation. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves is not only how do I protect myself, but how do I add value?
Yeah.
And if you have a skill set, right, one of the best ways to feel happy, and there's lots of research about this, is if you're not feeling happy, go help somebody less fortunate than yourself, and you will guaranteed increase your level of happiness. So, the question I've asked myself is, what if this doesn't change? What value can I add now that's different to the value that I had before? That's a self-leadership question, because it's a question that comes out of abundance. And one thing that what if the global economy does shut down and money ceases to be a reality, right? The dollar collapses, right? There is no currency. We have a post-apocalyptic world where we're trading chickens, or fee for service, or etc. So I don't think it's going to get that bad, but I think we are going to evaluate, how do we add value? Some of those people who are struggling right now are finding creative ways to use their assets. I was talking to somebody in a neighboring country to yours, and she was supporting small businesses through the crisis, and bar owners were crying, I want to open my bar. And she was saying, but nobody can come to your bar and buy your liquor. What else can you use that space for? We need storage for food. Why don't you turn your bar into a storage and distribution facility? Right? Now that is, that's the creativity that comes out of necessity. And it comes out of being ownership of, instead of blaming and complaining, how can I add value? When we shift into that mindset.
Yeah. There's a book by, I think his name is Nicholas Taleb, called Anti-Fragile. And
I haven't read that one. I'll add that to my very long list of books I've not read.
But he explains this.
What's the summary?
It's basically that there are 3 different kinds of people, or 4 different kinds of people. The fragile, the resilient. So the fragile people break under any sort of situation that's troubling. Then you got the resilient people. They don't break, but they don't grow either, right? So they just stay the same. And then you get the anti-fragile people, the people that not only not break, but actually grow from the external stimuli or the troubling situation or the stressor. And I think that's what I've been trying to teach people, is that you can be anti-fragile. You can use your creativity and your knowledge and your experience and all these things, and ask yourself just better questions, right? What else can I do? Where else can I go with this? And so I love that example of the bar, because the event coordinator here had to shut down the entire floor, can't host any events. And then the guy said, but what if we offer it as space for hospitals in case there's an overflow, and it's like immediately they got more opportunities available to them than they thought they had. And just asking better questions means you come up with better answers. So
no, you and I are both on the same page of that. I'm not sure. I mean, I like the growing through adversity. I define resilience as not bouncing back, but bouncing forward, right? So the point being, the actual definition of resilience is to bounce back, right? But if we return to our original space, right, then we really haven't learned anything. So the premise of this, I didn't quite get the author of the book's name, but the premise of that book is very good, because, there was an experiment I did in the physics lab when I was a grammar school student, and you had a steel cable that suspended from the ceiling, and you measured it, and then you added a weight, and you noticed that it actually increased in length with a certain amount of weight, and you took the weight off, and you noticed it returned to the same length again. But if you load it up and load it up and load, there came a point that it didn't return to its full length again. Something gave, it kind of went boom. And this was Hooke's law of elasticity, and you could calculate when this point of no return would be. And for me, that was an experiment that changed my life when I realized if I'm stretched, I will never return to be the same version of me. Right. And, personally, I've been through business collapse twice. I've been through divorce. I've been through life-threatening health issue, and each time I've come not just back, but forwards. Every time I would not be where I am today if I had not faced those challenges. I would not know what I know. I would not have the emotional control that I have now if I hadn't had those experiences. So whilst I didn't enjoy any of them at the time, I certainly enjoyed what the benefits of bouncing forwards or being anti-fragile gave me. And a good friend of mine at the beginning of this, a good friend of mine, member of my team, who's an organizational psychologist, he called me and said, "How are you going?" And I explained. He said, "Wow, you've got it together." And I went, "This isn't my first rodeo, right? This is not the first time I've had my life disrupted." And so I have the self-awareness and the self-confidence that I can get through this and I can adapt and grow through this. And I fully intend, as I hope everybody listening to this is, to be a better version of myself on the other side of COVID-19.
I think that's a brilliant way to end this off. Ask yourself the questions, what have you been doing during this time? Have you just been waiting for it to end? Because right now, this is now an extension, right? So our lockdown situation would have ended on, I think, 17 April. And I think a lot of people bargained on that, right? So they stored up just enough to get through that one situation. But now it's been extended for another 20 days or so. And I think a lot of people are panicking because they didn't prepare for that. And so what are you doing right now? What questions can you ask right now to come up with better solutions, better answers? And can you be more self-aware? That sounds terrible. Can you ask better questions to be more self-aware? And I think this is a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for giving your time and giving your expertise. And I think this has been really productive. And I would like to know anybody who has a comment on this. If you want to send me an email and just pass it on to Brian, Andrew Bryant. Andrew Bryant, not just Bryant, sorry. Pass it on to Andrew Bryant. I'm happy to do that. Please do look at his website. All the links will be below in the comments, in the description.
Yeah.
And
well, in terms of your viewers, if they go to selfleadership.com/SLA, that's the Self-Leadership Accelerator, which is some pre-recorded coaching around what we've been talking today. And I'm fundamentally giving that away during COVID-19. It's just a small donation to cover my hosting costs. Then people are able to get some of that coaching and framework if they go to selfleadership.com/SLA.
wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. All right. That will be in the description. That will be on the screen right now. You can see that. And by all means, and please do change your life for the better, because you do have the opportunity to do that. You do have the power, and it's all up to you. If it is to be, it's up to you. Right. So thank you, Andrew. It's been amazing. And hope to see you in 2021.
Yeah, I have plans to visit Namibia in 2021. So
brilliant.
All things going the right way.
All things going the right way. And even if they don't, we make things happen, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay. See you next time.